This is actually the first public exhibition of Hollis Williford's work since he passed away in 2007. And I think hopefully by the end of the presentation you'll agree with me that he was really one of the more important Western artists of the latter half of the 20th century. So in 1992, I bought the etching in the upper right-hand corner at a small antique store in Denver, and that purchase changed my life forever. I had no idea who the artist was, but I did know I had interest in Western art. And it was a couple of months after I purchased this work of art that this is before the internet, before you could Google somebody, before you could find out information about people, but I received a newspaper on my work desk, and it was promoting the Scottsdale Western Art Festival. So I got on the phone and I called a couple of the galleries down in Scottsdale, Arizona, seeing if they could tell me if the guy was even still alive, because I was interested in purchasing more of his work at some point. And these are the notes I scribbled on some paper I had on my desk that day. But I ended up talking to Trailside Gallery, and they said, well, we think he lives north of Denver. I was in Denver at the time. You might try that. So you remember when you used to call information, you call 1411, and then you say Hollis Williford, blah, 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 blah. And they said, yeah, he lives in Loveland, and his phone number is 303-669-2967. So I still remember the phone number. And I picked up the phone, I called him, and these are the actual directions to his home. And in typical Hollis Williford verbiage, he said, look for the house with the stockade fence around the outside of the house, meaning stockade like a Western fort, so like you couldn't miss it. And he invited us to come up. I thought, man, this is really crazy, but I would love to be able to buy some more of his etchings. So we drove up, pitch black the night, it was November, and pulled into the driveway. And I remember getting out of the car and thinking, I wonder if I'm in the right place. And there was two doors with a wagon, those half wagon wheel windows. And I walked over and I kind of looked through it, and I thought, oh my God, we're in the right place. And this guy's a heck of a lot more than I thought he was, and I'll explain that here in a minute. The next day, for whatever reason, I wrote the best letter I've ever written in my life. I have no idea why, but it just came out. And I sent it to him, and then a week later, we touched base again, and he said, hey, I want you to write my biography if you're interested. So this is Hollis when he was about 2 to 3 years of age, about 1942, and this is his grandfather on the right. He grew up in Texas, south of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I think what's interesting about this picture is that in the 1940s, the Great Depression was ending. World War II had begun. In fact, Hollis's father had left to go fight in the Pacific, and he didn't know his dad until he returned from the war. But for them to even conceive of this little boy to eventually be an artist was really beyond their horizon at that point. And then this is Hollis in almost 50 years to the day after this picture was taken. And I'm always struck by the two pictures, how similar they look. And the work here is what I saw through those wagon wheel windows. And I thought, my goodness, this guy's more than an etcher. He's a big-time sculptor. And this is Welcome Sundown. He's putting the final touches on Welcome Sundown, and that statue actually stands at the entrance of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum down in Oklahoma City. So in preparation for this presentation, I called my good friend Seth Hopkins, who used to be the CEO of the Booth Western Art Museum down in Georgia, and I said, what would you tell people about Hollis if you had the opportunity to do it? And he went immediately to Welcome Sundown, the bronze that he's working on there. And he said, Welcome Sundown is not the mythic story of the battle between man and beast, which defines much of Western art, nor the cliched tale of horse and rider as the ultimate Western story. It is merely one anonymous man standing in for all of us who work hard, ride for the brand, and don't quit till sundown. So I love that observation, because Hollis's grandfather was also that anonymous man. He was a hardworking guy. In fact, I remember Hollis describing his hands, his fingers, as being as big as cucumbers. He was a strong, strong man who grew up picking cotton and doing all the things to keep a farm going back in those days. But his grandfather also instilled in him a love for the West. They spent a lot of time hunting arrowheads and fishing and hunting on the farm. And all these things you can see in the themes of his work today. So one person, in this case a grandpa, can truly make a difference in the lives of many. And this is a continuing theme for this presentation. That 1942, when this picture was taken, the gift of that grandfather is upstairs. And we've all had that grandfather, somebody that stepped into our life at that point. So this is Welcome Sundown as it stands today. So if you go back to this picture and say, this kid is going to create that. One of the most visible Western artwork probably in the business. Michael, would you agree? Yep. Michael Grauer, who's a past curator for the National Cowboy and Western Heritage. Thank you for coming tonight. And if you haven't been to the Cowboy Museum down in Oklahoma City, make a weekend and go down and see it, because it really is a national treasure. It is a wonderful, wonderful place. And it's not just cowboy stuff. It's Native American work, history, and some of the most beautiful artwork on the planet is there. And it's uniquely American, as Eric mentioned earlier. So that brings us to the exhibition that's upstairs. And I could talk forever about Hollis, and we could take different angles and perspectives about his work, but I'm going to focus primarily on 4 areas that I think, if you go upstairs and look at his sculpture, these are the things that I think are important that you should look at. So the first thing is that while Hollis had a lot of artistic influences, a lot of people that were involved in his life that encouraged him to become an artist, I would place him on the family tree of Western art among the kind of documentarians of the West. And the first one is George Catlin. George Catlin was a painter who came through this part of the world on his way to Montana. He spent a lot of time in the West painting Native Americans prior to settlement in the 1830s. And then the second person was Edward S. Curtis, who was a photographer who photographed a lot of Native American subjects after the settlement of the West was completed. So you have kind of these bookends. Hi guys, how you doing? Did you get lost? I'm glad you made it though. Yeah, hope you have lots of questions. So both Catlin and Curtis are bookends in a pivotal chapter for about 70 years of the latter half of the 19th century. So Hollis was equally committed to historical authenticity and accuracy. And on the right, you see one of Catlin's paintings of Osage warriors. On the left, you can see Hollis's interpretation of essentially the same thing. What you see in Hollis's work is historical accuracy. So that's a really, really important part. He wasn't just dreaming this stuff up. He was actually researching it. This is another one. This is Boss Ribs. You can see the similarities. He's borrowing from the actual history. The people actually saw it and placing it in his work, building it into his work, but he's also taking his own creative adventure with it as well. This is Boss Ribs. And then this is Scalp Taker's Dance. I think this particular bronze, if you ever in the presence of this bronze, you actually expect it to jump off the base and run through your house. I mean, it is full of energy, and you can see how he was using the ideas that Catlin had painted when Catlin saw these events actually unfold. So that's the first thing, historical accuracy. What you see is accurate. The second thing is Hollis was also deeply focused on anatomical precision. And in the late 1970s, he was mentored by John Zahorik in Denver, who taught him to approach the human form with medical accuracy. So when sculpting, he wasn't just taking a mass and just scraping away at it until he got what he wanted. He was starting from the inside and building out. And so he built the skeletal structure, and then he would add each muscle mass and flesh as he built out. So, and then everything anatomically was accurate and precise. So this is him working on the Welcome Sundown that eventually won the Prix West from the Cowboy Museum in 1988. And you can see that he's got a rib cage, he's got muscle mass, he's got the pecs, but you can see the wire, and he's still messing with the arm, but everything is accurate and precise, and he's adding each muscle mass as he goes. And this is before he adds the shirt and before he adds the vest. And the net effect of this approach, this is a close-up of the Welcome Sundown bronze monument that stands from the Cowboy Museum, is it has a translucent quality. You can see the tendons and the veins in the hand, even though the hand is covered with a glove. So he's building from the inside out. So a third point, when you go back up to look at the work, is that he was a draftsman first. He loved to draw. He trained at the Los Angeles Arts Center for School for Design, graduated from there, but he was a draftsman first, and everything that he did, he drew first, and he drew all the time. He would have said that he practiced drawing every day with the discipline of a concert pianist. He drew all the time. And for him, there were no shortcuts. You couldn't just create a sculpture. It had to be worked out from different angles, different perspectives, and the only way through was the hard path. And he really believed in that. So this collection of drawings formed the basis for the Snake Priest and the Snake Brothers, both of which are upstairs. You can take a look at them when we're done here. And this is the first conceptual drawing of the Snake Priest. And you can tell he's working with the skeleton first. He's not working with the mass of the body or the clothing. And he created this on the kitchen table of his mother's kitchen table in Richardson, Texas. And you can see he's even fine-tuning his notes. You know, I got to make the pelvis a little shorter, the rib cage a little longer, all these kinds of things that he's working through. And then the next step, this is a final form of the Snake Priest. And you can see his reference here to Edward Curtis. So he's going back to the original documents, the original people that saw these things actually happen. And then he's also, one of the things that he did a lot, and he's finding in his notes, he was always working on titles, like as if he couldn't complete the work unless he had a title in mind. So he's got the Message to the Gods, the Call of the Rain, Summon the Rain, etc., etc., and he landed on the Snake Priest, which goes right back to Edward Curtis. This is Edward Curtis's photo of an actual Snake Priest. It was taken in 1906 as a Hopi. And pay particular attention to the headdress, the hairstyle, the pendant, and the snakes themselves. And this is where he landed in 1980 with the Snake Priest. So all of the things that I mentioned, anatomically correct, historically accurate, but he's also taking his own twist on this. And the only way you can really appreciate this bronze sculpture, I had never seen it in person until a few years ago, is to walk behind it and see the tension that he builds into it, because the Snake Priest is almost falling over as he's lifting himself up off the floor. And in my opinion, this is his greatest work. And it's in the permanent collection of the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. So the success of this bronze resulted in him pursuing a second bronze of the same scene only earlier, and this is Snake Brothers. And again, you see the convergence of his commitment to anatomy, anatomical precision, and historical accuracy, and creative adventure. He's playing with it, you know. And you can go upstairs and see the tension that built into this bronze. But here's the snakes. And he's doing the same thing here, but he's doing his own thing, but he's borrowing from Edward Curtis. Another example is the San Juan deer dancers, the San Juan Pueblo in New Mexico. And so pay particular attention to the headdress. And here in a moment, I'll show you a second photo, but this is a more contemporary photo of the San Juan deer dance, but this, I think he identified as the key element of the dance. And this is probably one of my favorite works of his, because he's stripping away all the unnecessary elements to get it down to its essential storytelling aspects. It's the hands, the headdress, the gesture, and the shoulders. And these are the front legs of the deer. But it's the clasping hands on the sticks as they're moving through the dance. So the fourth and final element that I want you to know about Hollis was that he had an instinctive understanding of plot, dramatic tension, and storytelling. So when you are creating a painting or a sculpture or whatever, you're placing it in a moment of time on the continuum of a story. And Hollis had this rare ability to place his artwork at the moment before the climax of the story so that the action is unresolved. A lot of artists tend to place it after the climax so that you know how it's going to play out. But Hollis had this ability to place it before you knew how it was going to work out. And the lead oxen, team of lead oxen have stopped. They're looking off to the right. You don't know why. But it's a simple etching, and he understood that truth. He could have had the oxen continuing to move, continuing to pull the wagon, but he had just this ability, and I think it makes it more interesting. He had a sense for that. You can see this kind of continuing theme in his work. This one is upstairs, The Man from Yellowknife. It's the same idea. Why has he stopped? What does he see? What does he hear? It's the mystery. It's the mystery of the work that makes it really effective. And then Trapline was an earlier work, but he's looking over his shoulder as if he's heard something, seen something. He's being pursued by someone you don't know. And that's the mystery of the work. And he was really, really, really good at that. One other thing that he did, so if you think about plot, that's horizontal. You got the rising action, the climax, and the other side of the action, the resolving action. But Hollis also did this vertical thing where he was playing with this liminal space between two worlds. You have the known above and the unknown below. So it's kind of like how he was playing with plot. And same kind of thing. He would put a sense of mystery into his work by playing with this space between those two worlds. That's why I chose the lily pads for the cover of his book, cover of the book that I produced a couple of years ago, to continue to build on that sense of what's known above and what's unknown below. So there's a sense of mystery about the book. So when you think about Hollis, these are the things that I want you to know about him. In my opinion, he stands as one of the great artists, Western artists of the latter half of the 20th century. Not just for his art, but for the people he influenced. He had uncanny range and versatility. Now, this up here, Patty and I have, how many works do we have in our house of Hollis's? 150? But he did all of them very well. And he loved all those areas. A lot of artists tend to focus in one area. Not Hollis. He was working in a wide range of areas, which is, I think, unusual. His subjects, as I mentioned, were historically accurate, but artistically original and emotionally true. A lot of things that Hollis did you have seen since then because people have duplicated him, but at the time he was very original. And then the other thing that stands out for Hollis was the impact that he had on people's lives, people like me. He was very, very generous. You could not go to his home and not walk out with an arrowhead or a etching or something that he would give you. But he was always aware of that little boy standing next to his grandpa, that it just took a few words of kindness to encourage somebody to live a creative and productive life. And he certainly had that impact on me. So what Hollis wants you to know about him, I asked him this one time during the course of the interviews, that he didn't waste a life. I think he'd be very disappointed today in all the time that we spend on our cell phones, looking at Facebook and all that kind of stuff. I mean, 4 or 5 hours a day. That everything that he did was for the positive. He was constantly working, constantly driving to do better. And then I think in the context of this exhibition that's upstairs, he always wanted to be an inspiration to that barefoot kid standing next to his grandpa, that you can do this, you can become what you want to be with your life, but you have to work at it. And this is Hollis at the height of his artistic powers. shown in his studio with not all of his bronzes, but a big chunk of them. He would be very proud, I think, to know that his work is being displayed here today, and particularly in a community like St. Joe, where it's fairly blue collar and people need access to the arts and to find inspiration. But also the fact that St. Joe, I think, was a gateway to the west. This is where they crossed the river to begin their trail, to hop on the trail to go to Oregon or California or Utah. And knowing that it's here and it's here for the summer, I think he'd be very excited to know that, and happy and pleased that you're here tonight. So thank you for listening to my presentation. Hopefully you got a few questions. So.